All right, Dr. Katie Dahlgren, thank you so much for joining us on our Go Beyond Summit.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, we are here talking to one of Dr. Klinghardt's go-to persons that lectures at his seminars, that teaches at the academy, and has been side by side with he and many of his colleagues for almost the past decade. And she is just an expert in EMF, radiation, and electricity pollution. She's a doctor of naturopathic medicine and has her own holistic healing arts clinic in Western Washington. Is it Edmond? Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you right now because I want to hear from you, and I know everyone else does. Let's talk about your experience with EMF. How did you get involved with it? How has it become such an integral part of clearing this stressor in your practice?
So when I first started working with Dr. Klinghardt in early 2008, I really didn't have any awareness as to how catastrophic this EMF situation was and how much more that's even grown since then. But in working in his practice, he draws patients who have some of the most severe neurological presentations that I had ever seen at that point as a very young new clinician. Kids with seizure disorders, lots of kids with autism, learning delays, adults with MS and Parkinson's and other, chronic fatigue syndrome, more common types of things like that, but that were so sick and no one was really able to help them. And one of the first things he taught me was don't miss this. You've got to be paying attention to the electromagnetic fields that are in their environment, especially in their sleeping location, but also look around them. Do they have a hybrid car? Do they have, did they just get, a few years later, a smart meter installed on the outside of their house? This can be playing a huge role. And it's helping people to identify those stresses and then find ways to lessen it made all the difference between patients who were never going to get better and patients who can have a completely different life than they ever expected to reach that level of wellness ever again.
Wow. So one question, how often do you see this as part of the challenge within your patient base?
So, yeah, I would say 100% of the time, this is a relevant, important factor. And when we look at the number one reasons that bring anyone to any doctor, so not just our practice where I personally see lots of kids, autism, pandas, autoimmune encephalopathy issues, but just in general, the top complaints that bring people into the doctor: fatigue, difficulty sleeping, cognitive problems, heart arrhythmias, things that often they go to their regular doctor and they say, oh, no, there's nothing wrong here. Everything's fine. Or if it is, it's just blood pressure problems or, probably maybe blood sugar problems. But all of these, I believe, are very much secondary to being an environment that is exceeding what the physiology of the body can handle.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Now, when you're going with Dr. Klinghardt and their Klinghardt Academy and the seminars, can you share with us some information that people would want to experience going to those seminars?
So, I'm highly biased. Dr. Klinghardt is my most treasured mentor and someone who I feel has contributed significantly to the field of medicine as a whole. But in saying that, I do get a lot of patients who are seeking out his training because he's so comprehensive. He's looking at all the different ways that that things that impact human health are integrated and how you need to treat the person as a whole and address these different fields. What is the relationship between parasites and metals and EMF and viruses and nutrient deficiencies? And, I've never seen another clinician who looks at such a global picture and doesn't miss structure and, recognizes all of those things. But it is fairly rare to find a practitioner who really, really is utilizing quantum physics and the idea that we are energy bodies in his practice and in his approach and understanding of what medicine is every single day. His whole autonomic response testing, muscle testing way of assessing the body is based on the fact that we are light emissions and we're interacting with things in our field. And you can both diagnose and then more carefully match, come up with individualized protocols for that person based on their energetic field. So you learn how to do that. He teaches prolifically all over the world to help people to acquire these skills and to have this awareness of how these different things are playing into chronic illness.
Definitely. Now, I read a lot of this research on just finding out how much EMF has a role in mold. Can you dive into that a little bit? I mean, we both, you live in Western Washington, I'm in Newport Beach, California, and you have these old homes and it's with all the more, there's already mold at the beach already. And then you add this EMF and it won't go away. And how does that tie into Lyme's disease and people wanting to clear mold out of their environment?
Well, what Dr. Klinghardt explained to me was that, mold is a very hardy and well-evolved organism. It's been around a really long time, and it actually perceives the presence of something like an EMF field from a router or something like that as being a threat and attack on it. And usually the molds are the most dangerous when they are in their defense mode and they are squirting out their toxins to try to defend their territory. And these things actually are becoming very, very aggressive because they feel like they are being attacked by these huge electromagnetic fields that are around us. And so they become very difficult to treat. And, having dealt with areas of colonization within the body from usually environmental exposure, but we only have a finite number of antifungals, and I absolutely use the herbs and other things as much as I possibly can. But I will tell you that I've got some patients with really serious life impacting fungal infections that are not responding to treatment at all. And I believe that the EMF is what is driving these organisms more than anything to be very difficult to treat.
Yeah, definitely. And it's similar to parasites, right? They charge off the EMF.
Parasites also, there's relationships there. And then also the metals are highly linked in with that. So metals act as antennas to for the EMFs in the environment. And then we've got parasites that tend to eat the metals, and about 70% of their body mass is metal. I believe that's true also of the yeast and fungal species in our bodies. But now we've got these organisms that have a big burden inside of them that is metals, and they're acting also as the antennas that are amplifying the signals that are in the environment, making it even more impactful on the human health.
Wow, unbelievable. Now, Dr. Dahlgren, you're a mom of 5. Please share some of the experiences with your kids and how to protect everybody else's kids as well.
Absolutely. So, I'm very, very blessed to have all of those boys in my life, and also that they are very healthy boys. And I've put a lot of effort into that. But when my youngest one was about 12 months old, Dr. Klinghardt asked me to do a talk on EMF, and I wanted to learn how to use some of the different devices because it was an in-person talk. We were going to discuss some of the meters and how to really assess a home environment, and particularly as it would apply to young children and preconception care, which is a major focus within my practice. And so for the first time at that point, I went through the home where I was living at the time and checked all of the outlets and checked for, the impact of the wireless router and things like that. And what I discovered was that right next to my son's crib, like 6 inches from where his back would be, there was an outlet, and it was leaking dirty electricity. And at the time, he had been having some issues where there was blood in his urine, and they were trying to rule out leukemia because of a platelet suppression that was just mysterious. He had been a totally healthy, no problem baby. And so there was just this, and he was crying all night long. And as soon as I put the sensor filters in to reduce that and get rid of the wireless router that was too close to the sleeping location, the whole situation completely resolved. So I should have known better at that point. I definitely had the information, and I just hadn't applied it to my own life. As a young mother and as a new clinician, I was so busy trying to take care of other things that I didn't do that. And my child very much so paid for that.
Wow. So you guys just mitigating the home. I mean, moving a router, putting in a Dave Stetzer electric meter, who's one of our speakers, or filter, I should say, in the outlet to drop those frequencies down. That is absolutely unbelievable testimonial.
Well, and it wasn't perfect. I was actually living with my sister at the time, and we were in a townhouse with a shared wall. I couldn't control everything about it. I couldn't even turn off the fuses to that shared wall of the structure, but just doing that much changed the impact on him so much that you better believe there will be Stetzer filters near the sleeping location of my family forever after seeing exactly how much of an impact that was.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So, you guys, I don't know if I want to clarify that. I mean, you're saying turn off the electrical outlet going into that bedroom as well, if we can. What are some of the other measures in addition?
Dr. Klinghardt would say actually the whole house. And this is something that I completely understand from an electrical science perspective. He talks about how these wires can conduct even if they're not on. The specific circuits are not on. And so he adamantly advises people to install a demand switch, turn off the electricity to the entire house. It seems like for whatever various reasons, sometimes their climate is too extreme to do that. They need either the heat or the air conditioning, or they have specific equipment within their house that cannot be unplugged for that long. They can't. But the few patients that I have had who have actually followed that advice have said that they have never slept better. Their energy level improves right away. Their sleep improves very quickly. They get so much better. So as many steps as people can take, even I urge people to start by just don't have anything plugged into the walls of the bedroom. You want to definitely make sure cell phones are not within no closer than 12 feet, but really even then they should be in a Faraday cage. And in airplane mode. Both of those things really would be necessary to reduce their impact. But getting the electrical devices away from where the sleeping location is really important. And making sure that your sleeping location is not 4 feet away from the smart meter that's right outside of your bedroom. I have told people, even if they have to sleep in their living room, you will not recover in that situation.
Definitely. That is so true. I mean, absolutely unbelievable. And we were chatting earlier about a client that I have that's had their kids right underneath one, and they all have tremendous health challenges. And what we found now is that Dave Stetzer actually also sells a sheath that can go on the inside of your wall that can really deflect that radio frequency coming at you and just shoot it a different direction.
That's awesome. I think that's kind of what we're going to need to be seeing moving forward is more of those types of things because, even I used to turn my wireless router off at night. And when we moved into a new house a year ago, my husband was on the phone with Comcast day after day, trying to get them to tell me how to turn this off. Oh, we can put parental controls and we can do, whatever, just to limit the devices. No, I want it off. They will not give you the information. You can't do it. It's got backup batteries. It is transmitting. It's crazy high signal all the time. So I have a Faraday cage for that router too, and I put it as far away from everything that's living in my house as much as possible. But it's becoming increasingly harder to just not have the exposure. So I think those types of shielding, whether it's the paint or sheets that go in the wall, or Dr. Klinghardt tells people to go get aluminum foil. So I've never tested that to see what that looks like if you ground it, but he claims it's going to help to stop some of that incoming microwave radiation.
Definitely.
People have to shield,
Oh, for sure. And then jump into, I want to hear your take on the 5G coming our way and, how scary and daunting that is. And if there's, anything that we could do to start to stop it, or at least educate the cell companies to know that, like, hey, I'm in California, you're in Washington, no matter where we are, we can still communicate. We're good on this, on the speed, on the quality.
Right.
We can have a conversation. It doesn't I don't have to touch you, to make it better. Like, I mean, that would be great, but that's great when we're together, not wanting to have that quality when we're, thousands of miles away. So, please speak on that.
I think the important thing is that people just keep seeking out the resources. So, I look for anything that's being released on Magda Havas's website, or, what their information is being provided on less EMF. I know there was a Russian study that looked a little bit at 5G, although it's very technical and we're dependent, I am, on a translation, but showing that the 5G impact on human health is likely to be exponentially worse than what we've seen so far. Now, that being said, as far as advocacy, I'm so grateful to people like yourself who are trying to get this information out there, because most people still are under the very uneducated assumption that this stuff is all safe, or the government wouldn't be allowing it to happen. When, having been present at Dr. Klinghardt's seminars, he will put up the specific approvals that are given to cell phone companies, and for using, even when it was much less catastrophic technology, still not good, like the 2.4 gigahertz cordless phones and those wireless baby monitors. But those things have in their approval, that's inside all of that little tiny handwriting paperwork that comes with every electrical device like that you ever buy. The FCC approval specifically notes in there that it's at the very least a probable carcinogen, but they're putting it into the same category as cigarette smoke as far as how likely it is to be bad for human health. And yet you don't see anyone, I don't see anyone responding to it that way. Sure, we'll rent the space above the kids' school to AT&T to put a huge tower right there, because then we can get some money for the school. They don't at all acknowledge that there's a problem with that.
Yeah, definitely. I concur 100% and feel we really need to understand, if we're in the business of cell towers, then go put cell towers up somewhere, not near people. But if we're in the business of commerce and education and dealing with people, there's going to be a huge detriment to the health and the actual commerce itself. There's going to be a deterrent. People intuitively are not going to want to go and shop in malls with cell towers right above them. They're just not. And so you have to really pick your lane. And if you're teaching kids, you have to understand the most important thing for the kids is to not be under attack with their blood-brain barrier and their skulls aren't fully developed and have these invisible
right.
pools. So it's a matter of picking a lane for sure.
Well, and I could see how big, but these things, they are, and they are just everywhere. I've gone to the same hotel to visit a friend of mine in the Portland area for at least 7 or 8 years now. And my kids love it there. There's a swimming pool that they like. And this last time we went, and my kids were behavioral nightmares. They were, my head hurts, Mom, my head hurts. My kids never have headaches. They were not themselves. Like one of them broke out in a weird skin rash. And I realized when they went to go run down the stairs, there was a big sign saying that AT&T had put a big tower up there. And I'm like, that's got to be what it is. And it could have been interacting with some mold too, but it was just like, wow, this is one day in an environment with kids that were completely asymptomatic and fine yesterday. And as soon as we got out of there, within 12, 24 hours, they were completely fine again. And I think about if this was their school and that was the situation, that was, just 100 feet from their head or wherever that thing was, how could you ever expect them to learn like that? They could not possibly have held it together to have been in a state to be able to receive information and integrate it, be able to even behave well enough to be able to stay in the class. Those kids would be labeled autistic so quickly. And it's shocking to see how much that impacts them.
Definitely. Well, actually 2 more questions. One on electric cars. Talk about that for me real quick.
So I don't know a lot about the science and the technology design of the electric cars, but I know that Dr. Klinghardt's big concern around it is that they do have big battery fields, and usually those battery fields are in the back seat. So that's where the kids are. I can say that I've had several patients who just don't feel well, and they are usually complaining of fatigue, sometimes even neuropathies, definitely brain fog and difficulty sleeping, heart arrhythmias. And when I ask them, hey, what kind of car do you have? Often that's the case. We're dealing with a hybrid or a fully electric car. And when they have sold that car and gone back to regular technology, those symptoms dramatically improve or resolve completely.
Wow. Wow. And then the last, probably most pressing topic that we could ever talk about is our future for future generations, our kids, 3, 6, 10, 12 generations out. I love to look at about 6 generations out in all the choices that I make. And can you talk about the EMF and how it's a stressor on fertility for both females and males?
Well, yeah, absolutely. For sure, we know that we're decreasing or completely eliminating sperm count for some men, but the amount is pretty dramatic. Dr. Mercola wrote a very good book, EMF Extinction, talking about part of this problem that we won't be able to reproduce. And then what people are still already on the planet, half of them are demented and half of them have autism. And so we're literally putting ourselves into extinction. So looking at these new generations and knowing too that the little developing brains, assuming that you are able to conceive, and really there are so many more fertility problems as the EMF use increases, we're seeing both genders are struggling more than they ever have, not being able to conceive. Once they are able to conceive, this water-filled environment of the mother's womb will concentrate the ambient EMFs by at least 5 times, if I'm remembering that statistic correctly. But the baby's being zapped so much the entire time that they're in utero. Being able to protect the pregnant mother in her location, and then to wear protective clothing when she's out and about during the day, is really, really important. So I'm a huge advocate for preconception care. Try to get the sleeping location, the work location, everything as clean as possible, protected before they even conceive. And then throughout pregnancy, that has to be treated like a really sacred time. And then once you have this kid, do not put a big, a baby monitor right next to their head. Everybody wants to have one, but that's got really nasty energy. And I do like the silver-coated blankets to help block some of that incoming radiation.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Dr. Katie Dahlgren, you are amazing. Thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing.
Well, I want to thank you very much for putting this on and for getting this information out there and for being so dedicated to helping to educate both patients and practitioners to be able to know what's happening in their world and in their body.
Definitely. Well, let's give a couple websites out. drkatiedahlgren.com is where they can find you. And that's Dr. Dr. and then Katie, KatieDahlgren.com, right?
That's correct.
And where can they go for the Klinghardt Academy? Because everyone wants to go there.
Yes, KlinghartAcademy.com. And they do have different devices that can help with both measuring the different EMFs as well as helping your body to bring in healthy frequencies to try to battle against this hostile environment that we live in.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Dahlgren, for going beyond with us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.